I don't want to change the word anymore. I'm tired of trying to change the word. I I just would like to visit, like I would like to eat a certain shawarma sandwich from my favorite shop. I would like to, I don't know, walk in my neighborhoods. I would like to go to my favorite church outside of Damascus. I would like to show Matthew places that I grew up in. And that would never happen.
Mm.
And 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 I don't know what to tell you about that.
Hello, I am Kay Anderson, and you are listening to Lost Spaces, the podcast that mourns the death of queer nightlife. Every episode, I talk to a different person about a venue from their past, the memories they created there, and the people that they used to know. Danny Ramadan is a Syrian-Canadian award-winning novelist, public speaker, and LGBTQ refugee activist who was born in Damascus, Syria. And it was in Damascus where his flat became a safe space for other queer Syrians. We caught up to talk about the flat, his experiences coming out, sexual citizenship, and the ethics of having sex with your own clone.
I would say that there's a lot of misconceptions about what Syria is.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of wrong answers out there about what it means to be Syrian, what it means to be from Syria. And those answers are even shared by Syrians themselves. Like, it's quite hard to pinpoint what Syria is because Syria has been in a state of flux for 1,600 years now.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to talk about Syria as a geographical location, it existed after the liberation from the French in the 1940s. If you're going to talk about the Syrian identity and what it means to be Syrian, it was created by the Syrian regime in the 1970s. So we will all fall under the control of the Hafez al-Assad dictatorship. If you're going to talk about it from like the Wikipedia page, Syria is in Minor Asia, in Asia Minor, I think you call it in English. It's a country that was liberated from the French in the 40s. Before that, it was liberated from the Ottomans in the early 1900s. Before that, it was occupied by the Ottomans for 400 years. Damascus is the capital, which is the oldest inhabited city in the world. It has been inhabited for the last 7,000 years. And it shows, it really does. Because like when you're walking in the streets of Damascus, you will see that every mosque in downtown Damascus used to be a church. And before that, it used to be a synagogue. And before that, I don't know, they were worshipping fire in there. And you can see on the walls, you can see in the ways that it's built, that it tells that history. It's hard to pinpoint Syria because part of the dictatorship of Hafez al-Assad and then his son Bashar al-Assad is that we erased everything that is before them and then created this identity of what it means to be Syrian. And everything, all that history before them was quite lost, honestly, which you end up then with nationalistic storytelling about the glory of the regime, with very limited connections to the actual culture on the ground.
Mm-mm.
Is this too philosophical of an answer? I have no idea.
No, but like, so this kind of limiting identity that doesn't reference anything from the past.
It's like as a person who was born into that mindset, as a person who grew up in Damascus, and my family never challenged that mindset, that limited mindset, and I was taught not to challenge it. And then you go through the experience of being a refugee, and you go through the experience of immigrating, and suddenly you are on the other side of the world trying to understand what it means to be Canadian, and that by itself reflect back and forces you to try to understand what it means to be Syrian. So it's funny that I didn't actually understood, or like I didn't even try to understand. I don't claim to understand all of Syria. I didn't start to understand my own position in Syria until I came here to Canada.
And so do you mean that in a, like when you were growing up, you accepted everything that you were told and you weren't kind of given the tools to think critically about things?
I mean, have you ever thought critically about you as a white person or as a British person? It is normal for somebody who's 14, 15, 16, up until you're in your early 20s to be indoctrinated into an identity
Oh yeah, absolutely.
without having the space um, to navigate it, without having the space to question it in reality. Specifically, if that identity is this geopolitical religious identity, it's this mixture of culture with religion, with politics, and with location that creates an identity that is almost overwhelming. That's almost, you either take it or you are in a void. You don't have anything else. Yes, we have, of course, like we have 23 different sects and religions in Syria, for example, but then they are united within their sects, and then they're united with the rest of the sects within the political situation. So there's always one ring that holds you into that identity that you're indoctrinated into. There's always something that it's keeping you from straying away from that identity. And it worked for the longest time. It worked until, of course, the civil war in Syria broke in 2000 and in late 2011. It started as a revolution in early 2011, and then it turned into a civil war, I would say, in 2012.
And so your experiences then growing up and at some point figuring out that you weren't heterosexual, how did that play out in your family and in like personal relationships?
Very well. It was fantastic. Everybody accepted me the minute. No, I'm joking. No, that never happened.
I was like, well, there goes the episode. No.
Exactly. Where's the trauma? I need the trauma. I would say, firstly, it was quite interesting to navigate that identity because growing up as a gay man, it felt extremely subversive, and it doesn't only go against the nature of things, the heterosexuality of things. It goes against the social aspects of things, the religion, the politics, the law of the land. It's punishable by 3 years in prison if you're caught in the act of homosexuality. It is punishable by public shaming, where you are going to be outed to everybody around, so they are going to keep you from harming any other more people. So it felt quite personal, I guess. But what sexuality is not personal? It felt quite hidden, and I had to hide it, and I had to keep it to myself, and I had to be, and I never rejected it, but I wished it away.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
I never thought of it as like a negative feeling, because I loved how it felt. I loved the boy, and I loved looking towards them longingly, and I loved feeling that connection, but at the same time, I wished it away. I just wished that I could just be like everybody else around me. I came out of the closet when I was around 17, which shouldn't surprise anybody because I was extremely flamboyant when I was 17. And I also come from an extremely dysfunctional family, so it also wasn't that I was worried that I'm going to break their hearts. I wasn't. I didn't. I still don't have a lot of care, maybe love, I don't know, connection, belonging towards my family. So when I came out, it wasn't that moment of connection that you might assume. You sit down with your dad and over coffee while reading the newspaper, or I don't know. It was a moment of conflict. We were having a fight, and I blurted it out, and I ended up being kicked out. Which, in a way, like at the moment, if I thought about it, it was the best thing that ever happened to me, because it started to allow me to break away from everything that society was pushing on top of me. And I broke free from all of those restrictions, and it allowed me to slowly but surely become the person that I am today. And it allowed me, just because we were talking about the Syrian identity earlier on, it allowed me to create my own unique Syrian identity that fits into my understanding of the geopolitical situation in Syria, of what it means to be Syrian, of the history of Syria itself, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so, so just thinking about, so you came out at 17. Do you remember when you had your first kind of inkling, like, oh, boys, oh?
I really don't. I don't know if it works this way. Like, there is a lot of stories about that first time that you feel an attraction towards a person, but I think it's way more gradual than this. I had always a best friend in elementary school since I was 6, and I just like to be next to that person, next to that boy. I was charmed by his jokes. I loved the way that he paints. I just wanted to hold hands with him, which at a certain age, it was totally fine. So up until I was 12, I was holding hands with other boys. I was connected to them. And then honestly, like there's always that story of, and then I saw that boy and I felt a moment of breaking within me, but I knew that I was longing. That doesn't actually, I don't know if that happened, at least in my own experience in life, in real life.
I thought the story was I had a dream and then I woke up and my pants were wet. And that's when I realized.
I mean, each their own. I don't know what's your story. But for me, honestly, like I cannot pinpoint that moment for you, even if I try. I can look back and see how I was a queer kid since I could ever remember. The way I talked, the way I loved dancing, the way I really wanted to create origami flowers when I was young, while all of my like friends and cousins were fighting with guns.
Same. Yeah.
Is that right? Like queerness is not just the sexual attraction that you have towards boys. It's about your whole personality. And I can tell you that from the earliest memory I remember, my identity is queer. It's right there. It's in the way that I talked, walked, danced, and what I wanted to play with. That sounded really like a double innuendo, but I wanted to play with.
Well, let's not discount that. The but so coming to terms with your sexuality, and obviously I'm not trying to paint it as like one day I woke up and I was like, yay, it is a gradual thing. Jazz hands, yeah. People can't see that we're doing jazz hands. Like, how did you access information in order to better understand it?
I didn't. I didn't until I was around 20 and I moved to Egypt. Mainly because the source of information that I had, the first articles that I read about homosexuality, the first Wikipedia pages I opened were in Egypt, because in Syria there's a lot of restrictions on what kind of information you receive. There's this iron wall that surrounds the country, where every book that is within the country is read by somebody and approved or disregarded. The internet, you will only have access to certain websites that are approved by the Syrian government. So it was quite limiting when I was much younger, and it was word of mouth. We gay people are really good at spotting other gay people. So when
I'm getting better, I used to be terrible.
Oh, my gaydar is above average, but I try my best. I try my best. Now it's much easier because I can like go to them and I'm like, hey, dude, are you gay? Like, yeah, sure. I'll be like, I'm questioning, like, no.
So do you do that like on the subway or like just walking around the streets?
Oh yeah, no, like, no, I don't. I really don't.
Hello, I can't help notice, but you're very gay.
Not gay as in happy, but queer as in fuck you.
Yes, just so we're clear.
Yeah, yes, exactly. So yeah, like it was word of mouth when I was living in Syria. It was sex-based, I have to say. Like there was no conversations to be had. There's no conversation about like sexual orientation and gender identity and sexual practices. All of that came much later when I was in Egypt, and that is when I started being quite more queer rather than gay. I think it's funny because like I evolved from a man who sleeps with men into a gay man into a queer man, and that has nothing to do with my sexual practices. It has something to do with my understanding of my sexual orientation and who I am as a human being, if that makes sense.
And it's more than sexual orientation. It's the wider identity. And then so what I guess I'm struggling with is then how did you like at 17, which is still quite young, how did you come to terms with it and feel able to communicate it? That's such a bland question. Tell me all your inner workings now.
Exactly right. From 20 years ago, when you were 17. Wow. I should have expired. I'm like, as a gay man, you expire at the age of 30. So
shush! Don't reinforce those types of stereotypes.
I know. I joke, like my way of destroying them is joke about them. I joke about them quite a lot. I think, as I said, it was curious at times when I was 17. I also ended up living on the streets for a while, so I had to vent for myself. I had to find a way to survive, and my queerness came in handy at the time. I also ended up being surrounded by other outcasts, I would say, or hooligans of my community, and those folks tend to be much more liberal when it comes to sexual orientation. So I also learned, I had a lot of acceptance from that chosen family. And then when I moved to Egypt, that's when I had my own job. I was living on my own, which is something not a lot of a lot of Arab gay men would have access to. Um, because you're born, you live with your family, you get married, you live with your wife.
Yeah.
There's no like in between bachelor living. So when I became a bachelor living in Egypt, that meant that I can safely host, if that makes sense. Which made me very popular in Cairo, to be honest.
Which, yeah, helps accelerate that exploration, right?
Oh, right.
But I guess, yeah, that the bit before, so like being at that position to tell your parents.
Oh. I would love to tell you that it's all about like activism, and I wanted to raise rainbows across the streets of Damascus and start the first Pride parade over there. But it wasn't any of this. I was naive, and I was an angry teenager, and I was a troublemaker. I was an asshole, basically, and I honestly had a humongous fight with my father, which is not something that is uncommon in my family. I had a huge disconnection from my father from an early age, and that fight ended up with me. He was questioning my friendship with another person, and I was like, just shouted at him, to be honest. And I was like, "Fuck you! He's my boyfriend." Something along those lines, really.
Okay.
Honestly, like
Defiant.
again, like I naive, defiant, rejectful, angry, and I like would 36-year-old Danny come out of the closet at that age to his father? That's a definite no. I don't think coming out of the closet was the in any way good for anybody who's involved in that situation. Am I thankful that I did it back when I was 17, back when I was naive enough to do it? Yes, because again, it put me on this journey to be here.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. There's something interesting there about and please correct me if I'm making massive assumptions, the freedom that you feel if you are from a family that has dysfunction, that you're not as bound to these feelings of acceptance and impressing them, I suppose. So that's maybe the wrong word.
I agree with that. I completely agree with that. I think that there is there's this need in the gay community for us to come out. And coming out as a narrative has been quite hyped, and we forgot why we do it. We forgot that it started in the 90s as a way of normalizing, in the 80s and 90s, as a way of normalizing gay people, specifically in the North American context. And I don't think coming out is all that great, to be honest. Like, you don't need to come out, because basically when you come out, you're putting yourself in a situation where your life, your self-worth, your respect for yourself is all in the hands of somebody else. And that makes no sense to me. If you're gay, you're gay, and that's between you and yourself. And if you need to save your relationship with your loving mother, and you don't want to break her heart because you know that she is extremely conservative and you want to stay in the closet, I would say go for it. Who fucking cares? Just stay in the closet, if that makes sense to you. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, I'm not, I wouldn't say that I disagree, and everyone has to make their own decision based on their own circumstances and the context within which they're living. But at the same time, there is a level of authenticity that you miss, or there's a level of self-policing that you have to endure if you are in a situation where you're not able to come out. And I think that's difficult emotionally and mentally.
I mean, at the end of the day, we are two out gay men. That I'm assuming here, but we are two out
No,
gay men.
I haven't told anyone. Please don't tell.
Oh,
Please
okay.
don't tell anyone. No.
Just everybody who's listening right now. We are gay men talking about the value of being in the closet. I would say yes, 100%. It depends on your circumstance. It depends on all of that. But at the same time, it doesn't add or take away from who you are as a person. It doesn't take away your gay card that you're not out of the closet. It doesn't give you this like gold star if you're out of the closet. It's
Oh,
it's
absolutely
just
not. No. And I mean, and going back to what you said, like the whole kind of movement for coming out is because the people who led that movement were about this should be normalized. This should not be a traumatic experience for anyone because it shouldn't. It should just be something.
But at the same time, that also includes, think about it this way. Somebody who lives, I don't know, in the Bible Belt in North America and in the US, and they come out to their family and they're rejected, they can move somewhere. They can move to Austin or Texas or like wherever that is the nearest cosmopolitan city that is they can move to. And they can start a life there, and there's support and there are laws and there are 100 different million things that they can be supported by. But also, we keep forgetting that we also export the concept of coming out across the world and make it a value for queer folks across the world. And in somewhere like Syria, and you come out of the closet, you are doomed. You have a challenge now in life. You are an outcast. You are illegal. If my father killed me at the age of 17 instead of kicking me out, he wouldn't even have to go to court. So I'm not saying don't come out if it fits you, if you are safe, if you know that you have other alternatives, if the value of coming out and creating that authentic relationship with your parents is more important and way more than the alternative, then go for it and come out. But at the same time, I completely think that being in the closet is a total, complete, valid way of living. There's nothing wrong with that. Again, I say this as an out of the closet gay man who is married to another man and flaunt my homosexuality all over the internet. So
let's talk more about the flaunting then. Can you give me some examples?
Of flaunting my sexuality? I mean, you can go to my Instagram.
but no OnlyFans yet, right?
Well, it's 2020. You never know.
Yeah. I mean, so going back to your point, yeah, I agree. I guess it's a very simple but very complex concept of coming out.
Yeah.
And it's going to be absolutely different for everyone, unless you're a twin, maybe.
Unless you're a twin. Oh. Sure. I mean, I'm really good at negotiation and like so bubbles in the brain. So I'd be happy to negotiate that. But let's move on. Let's have a different.
Well, okay, yeah. I mean, not all twins. I'm happy to give you that. But there will be some twins where the experience is the same. Like, let's be real.
Okay, do you have a twin?
No. Oh,
No,
so
me
are you
neither.
saying I don't get to comment on this because I don't have a twin?
Speak of culture appropriation.
Okay. Well, I mean, you just should be thankful I'm not taking it to a point where I'm suggesting that twins sexually experiment on each other, and how jealous I am that they get that opportunity. So
I saw a Spanish movie about that once.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there's a Spanish movie.
Do you know the title? Oh, damn. Okay.
I can't remember the name.
I will Google it.
It's about a twin, like two identical twins who are experimenting on one another. Which
I mean, it's totally natural. Like, of course you would.
With your twin, though?
Yeah, of course you would.
That's a lot of self-indulgence.
Okay, but so like, what about your clone? Do you have different feelings if it's your clone?
Yes, I don't want to sleep with my clone either.
It would just be such a fascinating lesson.
And I, I, that's very disturbing, my friend. No, I really don't want to sleep. I really don't. I, I don't know. We'll end up butting heads for sure because I'm very stubborn. So we'll end up like hating each other. I think honestly, if
Okay,
I
but like if it was a
met,
one night stand and you didn't talk to each other, like
well, but forget about sex. Like if I actually met another version of myself, somebody who's exactly like me in every way, I will find them annoying. I'll find them self-indulgent and annoying and full of themselves, like cocky to the point of being cocky. Like I think,
I'm not suggesting you
yeah.
talk to them.
Oh my God. Okay. Okay. All right.
Well,
This conversation has gone places, I tell you.
I just think it would be super interesting. I'm just putting it out there. You'd learn a lot about yourself and the way that, you know, you're perceived during sex. And
I will hold you to that. When cloning becomes legal, okay, you're going to clone yourself and then have sex with yourself and then report back to us.
well, I mean, I think I need to patent the business idea of a cloning company that is specifically for sexual acts. I probably just need to get a jump on that, right?
I'm sure like virtual reality can make that happen without cloning somebody because like if you clone yourself for a sexual act, what do you do with yourself after you're done?
Well, I mean, my
Like
business
there's
would take care of it. My business would take care of it for you. No guilt
it's
involved.
am I killing myself in a way? Is the business killing me? How do they know which
I mean,
one is
that's
the clone and which
capitalism, right?
that's capitalism. Yeah. I mean, there's a market there. I'm sure you're you're onto something.
Well, yeah, you heard it here first.
Yeah.
So,
God.
so when did your flat become a center, a hub?
Mhm.
Like at what point?
I I'll have to jump with you 10 years ahead. So I left Syria when I was 20, when I was 20, 19, 20, something along those lines. Lived in Egypt for 7, 8 years, lived in Malaysia for 6 months, in Turkey, went back to Egypt, traveled around like a maniac. And then I went back to Syria in late 2010. Stayed in Syria for a bit, went back to Egypt, and then in 2011, January 2011, I moved full time to Syria. And honestly, like I didn't have plans. Like I came to Syria and I was like, I'm just going. There's a revolution. I honestly thought that the regime is going to fall in 6 months, which now 10 years later is extremely naive of me. Like I was extremely stupid to actually believe that. And I wanted to be there for that moment in my life. I wanted to be there. I was much more educated and activisty, I would say, in the LGBTQ community. And I wanted to be part of that change. So hoping to bring that acceptance into my birthplace. Of course, the month passed by and the revolution turned into a civil war. And then I was stuck there. Like I wanted to leave, but I was stuck there for the foreseeable future. At the time, I started working in a newspaper in Syria, and I met this lovely lesbian woman. Now, when I met her, I didn't know that she's a lesbian. I honestly did. It was like this sexual orientation tango dance between the two of us, where we are talking about sexuality, but we never come out to one another. It's clear to me that she's a lesbian. She told me later that it was clear to her that I was gay, but we never actually came out because of fear of persecution if you're not 100% right.
Yeah.
She's funny because she would come to me in the morning, and we'll be having coffee in the office and look at the window, and I would see like I don't know, a fancy car, and I'm like, oh my God, I love this car. And she would be like, oh my God, I love this car too. And you know what else I love? I'd be like, what? And just gay people. I love gay people. I'm like, oh, okay. So you're putting the B in subtle. I see.
Wait, did this
Um,
actually happen?
yes, I swear to God, this actually happened. Like, this is her way of giving me the space. This was literally her way of giving me the space to come out of the closet, where she would be like, um, literally talking about like a cousin of hers who is gay and a friend of hers who's a lesbian, but she'll never actually come out of the closet. We played this game for like 3 weeks, and then I got really bored of it, to be honest. And I came out to her. Like, I went to her one morning, and in the office, I was like, "Hey, it's just so you know, like, I'm gay." She's like, um, "Duh, I know." And I'm like, "And you're a lesbian?" And she's like, "Yeah, I am." And I'm like, "Okay, cool, awesome." So we went out that night, that very evening, to celebrate our coming out to one another. I don't know what we're celebrating. It's civil war. You celebrate whatever the fuck you can celebrate. So we went out to a bar, and we had a couple drinks, and then the bar closes early, so because of the civil war and the curfew. So I was like, "Hey, do you want to hang out in my apartment?" She's like, "Yeah, sure." So she came over to my apartment, and then she called a couple of her lesbian friends, and I called a couple of my gay friends, and they came over, and we ended up with like a party of 8, 10 people in the apartment. Um, and it was the thing that stood out the most to me in that space is the fact that every single one of them have never met somebody who's from the opposite sex who's also queer.
Oh, wow.
So none of the gay men have ever met a lesbian before, and none of the lesbians have ever met a gay man before.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that me and my friend um, found each other allowed for that segregation to be broken. And then I started inviting more gay friends, and she started inviting more lesbian friends, and then friends have started to invite friends, and suddenly we have a house of 150 people who live in there. It was a freaking, like, I would walk in from my office at 5 6 in the afternoon, and I would find people having sex on my bed that I have no idea who they are.
Okay, I want to ask
Like,
more questions about that. But before I do, can we just skip back? So, why do you think it is that the gay men never interacted with lesbians and vice versa?
well, to be honest, to begin with, the Syrian community is a gender segregated community. So
Okay.
it's quite common. Like, you grow up until you're 18, schools are gender segregated, and they're in university. Boys hang out with boys and girls hang out with girls, and a girl who hangs out with a boy has a problem with her honor. I
Oh,
would
oh,
say.
okay. So not gender, not
So
not a problem with her gender identity, a problem with her honor.
exactly.
Okay.
So a girl who hangs out with a lot of boys, people would think that she's a sharmuta, she's a whore. So universities are not gender segregated, but in a way, because of social dynamics, they become
It's the
gender
default.
segregated.
Yeah, yeah.
Exactly. So where would a random gay man and a random lesbian woman ever meet then?
When they work for a
Um,
newspaper.
well, exactly, when they work for a newspaper. And women in Syria are not high percentage of women. A lot of women in Syria work, but not a high percentage of women in Syria are actually out in the workforce. They get married and they become wives,
Hmm.
and they keep up with the home. Um, so the chances of a gay man hanging out with a lesbian is extremely low. And then I ended up introducing all of those gay men to the lesbians and the lesbians to the gay men. And we ended up with a party hub. The apartment started as a party hub where um, people who needed a place to crash, they would. People who needed a safe place to practice love, they could. I I ended up making what? Say
No,
it.
no. Like, so I mean, I interrupted you before when you were talking about people fucking on your bed, and that's not like me at all. So I'd like to apologize. Can you just talk to me more about that and the art of practicing love?
the art of practicing love. That should be the title of my memoir or my self-help. Yeah, either or. The art of practicing love. Um, well, also think about it that way. Where would a gay man be able to have sex with another gay man, except for a car on top of a mountain or in some like abandoned building or something, in a place where it's not common for somebody to live a bachelor life. Syria is, again, a family-oriented community. So you live with your family until you move with your wife or your husband. So that created a lot of tension, I would say, because gay men wouldn't be able to practice love. And then I created an opportunity, and that opportunity became quite important in my community, which is my house was safe. I had 2 bedrooms, a living room. I was comfortable with people bringing their boyfriends, their girlfriends, or even like a random hookup. I don't care. And I was comfortable with offering this like sex positive space for folks. And that's how it started, really. Like, it didn't start as like this hub for people to learn about their sexuality. It started as a safe sex positive space. And I would walk sometimes, because what I did is that I copied my key and I told people that they can copy the copies. So people would just make copies of my key and show up whenever during the day and just hang out. Because again, it's a safe space to hang out. So I would sometimes walk in and find 2 boys going at it in my bed, and sometimes I sat there and watched, and sometimes I jumped in, and sometimes I was like, "Oh, okay, cool, good for you," and I went to make dinner. It's
And how often did you wash your sheets?
Oh, not very often.
So what, were they just like cardboard?
Guess, I don't know. Well, at the end of the day, you also have to like. I come from poverty, friend. Like, it was a very like poor neighborhood. It was. I didn't have a lot of money at the time. I didn't have a washing machine at home, so a lot of times I would wash the sheets on my own. So I would say that that was definitely something that wasn't clean or sanitary in that apartment. But we did
just
our
imagining the smell when you walk in, like, wow, men.
And women.
Yeah, ooh, all those bodies.
And then it turned into a hub, because like this was just a space for people to have sex, really, honestly. And then it turned into a hub. I traveled to Turkey for 3 weeks from Syria, because I was invited to participate in a sexual orientation, gender identity, human rights conference. And in there, for 3 weeks, I ended up in this intensive workshop style training on sexual orientation, gender identities, gender practices, biological sex, sexual citizenship, and how all of those things come together to create your identity as a queer person.
Wait, so what's sexual citizenship?
Oh, that's a beautiful question. I love that question. So your sexual orientation is who you're attracted to. Your gender identity is what's in your head as a person regarding your gender. Your biological sex, it's what you were assigned at birth, whether male or female. And then your sexual practices is what you actually do in bed. And
or in Danny's bed.
Or in Danny's bed, yes. More like in Danny's bed, yes. Or what Danny does in Danny's bed. But the thing is about sexual practice, before we jump into sexual citizenship, is that the further away your sexual practice is from your sexual orientation, the least happy you are. So if
Okay.
your sexual orientation is gay, but you live in a society where you're forced to marry a woman and now you're sleeping with a woman, then your sexual orientation and your sexual practice are now at odds.
Mm-hmm.
And that creates conflict within you as a human.
Mm-hmm.
Now, your sexual citizenship is the way society around you views you and where the society puts you in the hierarchy of its own according to your sexual orientation, gender identity, sexual practices, and biological sex. Which means I'm a gay man who is attracted and practicing sex with another man. And in Syria, my sexual citizenship was quite in the negative because society looks at me quite negatively.
And is that because is that the perceived you or the you the way you identify?
Well, in that example, that would be the I was kind of in the closet, but not really, and I was kind of out of the closet, but not really in Syria. Like I was in a circle of a closet, if that makes sense.
So like a walk-in cupboard with like.
More like a mall. A lot of people knew that I was gay, but I wasn't walking around with rainbows, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah. So basically, if I was out of the closet, like completely out of the closet in Syria, my sexual citizenship would have been completely in the negative.
But then does that mean then, sorry to labor on this, does that mean that your sexual citizenship can shift depending on how you're perceived?
100%.
Okay.
It shifts, depends on where you are, because now that I moved to Canada, my sexual citizenship is in the positive. It's not as good as a heterosexual white man, because now when you look
what
at
is as good as a heterosexual white man? Like, let's get real.
Nothing is. Especially if they're young and newly married. That is like the peak of privilege. Young, newly married white men. Yeah, I know, right? They're so up there.
I have to be careful because I'm so white.
Well, I'll give you a pass for today.
Thank you. I'm willing to betray white people. It's okay.
I mean, the act of betraying white people is literally an act of resilience, so you should do it more often. So yeah, like, yes, it changes according to who is viewing you. It changes according to how comfortable are you. And so for example, look at it from a different perspective. A person whose sexual orientation is gay, whose gender identity is male, but whose sexual practice is he exclusively sleeps with women, is still seen by the society as having a positive sexual citizenship in Syria, because they are not actually doing the practice of homosexuality. They're keeping that to themselves, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. And then the flip side of that is if there is a heterosexual man who is effeminate and therefore perceived to be homosexual, his citizenship is in the negative.
100%, because being your sexual practice is not just about how you're having sex. It's not about, are you into, I don't know, S&M or fisting. It's also about the way that you present your sexuality to the world. Your what's the word? Your gender expression. So your gender expression and your sexual practices are living in the same realm, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay, so I've had my quick lecture on this. Let's go back to the conference in Turkey, because I took you off track.
So yes, so I learned a lot of this language in that conference in Turkey. It was a very enlightening moment. And then I went back to Syria, and I would tell you the people who would come to my apartment have noticed a humongous shift in my personality, I would have to say. Um, Between Danny, the party boy who wanted to bring vodka and let's party and maybe throw an orgy, into Danny, the person who's
God.
talking like I'm talking to you right now,
Now I want to
right?
talk
Like
about the orgy. God, why did you bring that
oh my God, dude.
up?
Like, who's your target audience?
Let's stick on the track. Come on.
So yes, I started doing circle sharing events where people are sharing their experiences, and then they started an orgy. I
Well, it's the
was
best way to
doing
start, right?
I know, right? You start talking about your feelings, and then you engage in an orgy. That's it's almost therapeutic. And then we started having like a movie night every week. So every week I would download illegally a queer movie of some sort. So The Birdcage, The Vagina Monologues, Queer as Folk, all of those things I would download and get people to watch them. And of course, like the only stories I could find that are on a medium that would attract people are stories of white people, like Queer as Folk, like The Birdcage, like The Vagina Monologues. But still, it was a gateway, I would say, a gateway drug to all of those folks who are starting to now understand their experiences, who they are, what they do, what it means to be a queer person, what is the difference between being just sexually a queer person versus somebody who understands their space, their position within their society, I would say.
Mm-hmm. And so, I guess, so how did people find out about the space?
I would say word of mouth. It was mainly word of mouth. I didn't we had a Facebook group, like a locked Facebook group, and I was the admin, so I wouldn't allow anybody I don't know into the thing. And and for you to be allowed, you have to come into Danny's bedroom. No, I'm joking.
I just need to verify your authenticity. Come on.
I just need to see how gay you are. Oh my God. No, I'm joking. Oh my God. And we had a Facebook group, and it was quite lively, and we just used word of mouth because we were worried that we might be arrested for it, which I ended up being arrested for it. So yay.
Oh yes, yeah. What happened?
Well, I wouldn't be able to tell you even if I knew, honestly. Like I was traveling to Jordan for a book-related thing, and then when I returned, no, in my way there, I was arrested at the airport, and they never told me why. Now, and I was arrested for 6 weeks. Like they released me 6 weeks later, and I honestly don't know why I was arrested. Like nobody actually asked, like nobody provided me with that information. And there's a lot of reasons why somebody like me would be arrested in Syria. Like I was writing under a fake name for The Guardian and Foreign Policy and reporting to the Washington Post. I was working with NPR at the time. I was publishing from Twitter photos and videos from on the ground interactions within Syria. I was running the house. I did a million things that a person can be arrested for in Syria, and then lo and behold, I was arrested.
So it's not. It's so they, I mean, they had a list to choose from. So there wasn't. So it's not. No one ever said it specifically because of the house that you're running.
No. It's well, and it killed the house like on the spot. Like when I got arrested, nobody else ever went back to the house basically, and the house doesn't exist anymore. Like the government went in and removed the whole neighborhood. That neighborhood doesn't exist. It feels really weird to like look at it on Google Maps because
It's completely
Google
different.
Maps, yeah, Google Maps still remembers where the roads were, but see that the houses have been completely destroyed. So it's a desert at the moment. They didn't start to rebuild.
Ah.
But Google Maps still remembers like there's a road there. There used to be a road there, but it's a piece of desert at the moment.
Oh wow. And so, but like, so you talked about it killing the space and people stop using it. How did they
Mhm.
know that you were arrested?
Um, hmm. I honestly never asked. Oh my God. I honestly never asked. I should ask. I I I got released six weeks later, and I got released because the people in the house worked together on raising funds, and they bribed the right person, and the right person ended up releasing me from imprisonment, and then I ended up traveling to Lebanon and became a refugee there. But I honestly have never asked how they found out. Huh.
But thankfully they did.
Yeah, thankfully they were. I mean, like at the end of the day, I was expected to return in like 4 days because I was traveling to Jordan for 4 days and come back. So probably when I didn't come back in 4 days, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, how
Yeah.
interesting.
I know. I never actually asked. That's wow. Weird. I should call her and ask her. Huh. Hmm.
When I'm rounding out these types of conversations, I usually ask something really cheesy about, like, if you could go back, what would you do?
I would, like, it's. I'm Syrian Canadian. I have a Canadian passport right now, and I identify as Canadian. I love being Canadian. Um, but also I'm an author, and I exclusively love writing about Syria. Um, but the last time I was in Syria was 8 years ago, friend. Like I left Syria in June 2012.
Mm-hmm.
That was over 8 years ago, and it's really hard because like I I was writing a scene in my next novel, and I wanted to get a character to walk in an old neighborhood in Damascus, and I tried my freaking best to remember how the neighborhood is structured, like what supermarkets are there, or what like big memorable buildings are there that I can like describe in my scene, like so I can be authentic about it. And I couldn't. I like completely blanked out on things. Like I don't remember it. And that makes sense because like the last time I walked in that neighborhood was 8 years ago. Um, and then you try to go to Google Maps and you try to like do the street view where you can like get a character to walk in the actual street, but that's something that Syria doesn't allow. So Google does not have street view
Ah.
in anywhere in Syria, which means that I can't just like use technology to allow me to go back. I don't know if I got on a flight. I mean, forget about COVID, forget about all of that. If life was quote unquote normal, and I got on a flight and I was like, I'm going back to Damascus. I don't know if I'm going to be arrested again in an airport.
Uh-huh.
That a possibility, and it's not like the Canadian government and the Syrian government are on the best terms at the moment. So even if I was arrested, I don't know if the Canadian government will be able to like get me out. So, and I would love to take my husband to my place of birth and like show him where I grew up and show him my city and show him my history and get him some authentic Syrian food that only there you can find. But I'm not allowed to, and that will never happen, I don't think, in my lifetime. So it's like my writing, it's like my sense of being is being denied its source in a way. And that's pretty sad. I'd have to say that's not the best. Yeah, that's not the best thing ever. No.
If you want to catch a little bit more of Danny, you can find him thirst trapping all over the internet on Twitter and Instagram. His profile handle is Danny Sees It. Lost Spaces is not only a podcast, but a concept record as well. I've been writing songs about queer venues and the people who used to live their lives there, and will be releasing songs over the next year. You can hear the first single, which is called Well-Groomed Boys, and is playing underneath my talking right now on all good streaming platforms. If you enjoyed this episode, I would really appreciate if you subscribed, left a review on Apple Podcasts, or just told other people who you think might be interested in giving it a little listen too. I am Kay Anderson, and you have been listening to Lost Spaces.